Have you ever felt a void that only an animal seems to understand? In the heart of the Serengeti, where the sun scorches the earth and the wind carries ancient stories, a lioness and her cub faced the impossible. The drought of 2022 turned rivers into cracks and dreams into dust. But what happened between a desperate lioness, an elephant that defied logic, and a ranger named Mosey? Well, it's the kind of story that makes you stop and rethink everything. Seriously, can you believe a single moment of compassion can change the fate of so many lives? Picture this: an orange sky, the dry smell of scorched earth rising with the heat. In the middle of it all, a lioness fights to keep her cub alive, facing elephants, treacherous waterholes, and nature itself. And years later, what came of it will leave you speechless. This isn't just a story of survival. It's about trust, empathy, and bonds that even the harshest drought can't break. If you love stories that warm your heart and make you think, give this a like and subscribe so you don't miss any. Today, you'll hear about a silent pact between species, a rescue that feels otherworldly, and an ending that proves nature always has something to teach. But how did a lioness and her cub survive the worst drought in the Serengeti? And what does an elephant have to do with it? Let's start from the beginning, with a land that seemed to have forgotten how to reign. The Serengeti in 2022 was unrecognizable. Rivers that once sang with crystal waters became scars in the earth, and the tall grass that danced with the breeze was now just golden dust. The sun punished without mercy, and the air carried a dry, almost metallic smell of relentless heat. Animals, from the smallest antelope to the largest elephant, searched for any shade, any drop of water. Have you ever seen a place where life seems to hold its breath? That's exactly what it was like. In the midst of this desert that was once a savanna, the waterholes maintained by rangers became contested oases. Zebras snorted, elephants trumpeted, and hyenas cackled nervously, all eyeing the same muddy water. Survival became a dangerous game where every sip could cost dearly. And at the center of it all, a lioness named Nia, with golden eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world, fought to keep her cub, Quito, alive. Alone, without their pride, they depended on a ranger-patrolled waterhole and Nia's courage to face anyone who came near. Who hasn't felt like the world is against them, yet kept pushing forward? Nia prowled the waterhole with light steps, the sound of her fur brushing the dry earth like a whisper. She knew elephants and buffalo wouldn't hesitate to drive her away. Quito, with his clumsy paws and curious eyes, followed his mother, oblivious to the danger. He still saw the world as a playground, even if the cracked ground told a different story. Sometimes Nia would pause, licking her cub with a tenderness that seemed to defy the drought. Can you imagine what was going through her mind? An instinct, screaming, "Protect him no matter what." But the waterhole was treacherous. The shallow, muddy water sat in a deep pit with slippery edges. Every visit was a risk. And that afternoon, with the sun burning like embers, something was about to go wrong. How would Quito, so small and so curious, face a place even his mother couldn't fully tame? Nia and Quito were an unlikely duo against the world. Separated from their pride, likely by a hyena ambush or the chaos of the drought, they were a team of two. She, a lioness with taut muscles and eyes that seemed to read the soul of the savannah. He, a gangly cub with oversized ears and a habit of rolling in the dust that made Nia huff. Seriously, have you ever seen a cub turn a tense moment into pure lightness? Quito was like that, a ray of sunshine in a world that seemed to have forgotten how to smile. Their life revolved around the waterhole. Every dawn brought the same ritual. Nia woke with the first ray of light, the heat already rising like steam from the hot earth. She sniffed the air, catching the musky scent of other animals, zebras, buffalo, and worst of all, elephants, who dominated the waterhole with their trunks and heavy hooves. With Quito glued to her legs, Nia descended the slope with steps so light they barely raised dust. Survival wasn't just strength, it was strategy. She chose moments when the waterhole was empty, often waiting until dusk, when the sky turned purple and the air cooled, offering fleeting relief. Can you feel the weight of that weight? But Quito, Oh, Quito didn't understand patience. He wanted to explore, leap, chase butterflies that miraculously still fluttered in the drought. Once he tried to hunt a rock, tumbling down the slope, and raising a cloud of dust that made Nia let out a low growl, half annoyed, half laughing. Who hasn't looked at a little creature and thought, how do you survive being so distracted? But Quito's curiosity was a problem. The waterhole, with its slippery edges and muddy water, didn't forgive mistakes, and Nia knew it. She kept the cub close, but sometimes her eyes drifted to the distance, as if asking the universe for a bit of luck. The rangers, like Mosey, were their only allies. Mosey, with his old truck that creaked louder than thunder, brought extra water to the waterhole and kept larger predators at bay. Nia, wary at first, began to tolerate his presence. It was almost as if she knew this human, with his battered hat, and calm demeanor was part of their survival. A timid but real trust was forming. Imagine that. A lioness, a cub, and a ranger, all linked by an invisible thread of hope. But then, on an afternoon when the sun seemed to melt the sky itself, Quito did what Nia feared most. His curiosity led him too close to the waterholes. Edge. And in a blink the ground gave way. How would Nia face the despair of seeing her cub in danger, with elephants lurking and the treacherous waterhole ready to swallow everything? The sun was relentless that afternoon, as if it wanted to cook the entire Serengeti. The waterhole, that muddy oasis Nia and Quito called salvation, shimmered under the light, but its slippery edges whispered danger. The air carried a damp, almost rotten smell of stagnant water mixed with hot earth. Nia, with her golden eyes half closed, prowled the area, each step calculated, her tail swaying like a metronome. Quito, of course, had no such caution. He bounced between rocks, his tiny paws, kicking up clumps of dry dirt, as if the world were just an adventure. Have you ever felt that pang in your chest when you see someone you love running straight into danger? Nia descended to the waterhole's edge, lapping at the water carefully, always keeping an eye on her cub. But Quito, enchanted by a dragonfly, dancing over the mud, took one step too far. The earth gave way with a muffled thud, like a sigh from the savannah. In an instant he slipped, his paws scratching in vain, and fell into the waterhole with a splash that echoed like thunder. Nia's heart stopped. She let out a guttural roar, so deep it seemed to tear the sky. Seriously, can you imagine the panic of a mother watching her cub trapped, the muddy water sapping his strength? The waterhole wasn't deep, but for a cub, like Quito, it was a deadly trap. He thrashed, eyes wide, claws scraping the slick walls. Nia leaped to the edge, her body taut, muscles trembling. She tried to reach Quito with her paws, but the mud slipped, and each attempt made her slide further. Her roars turned to wails, a sound that cut through the soul. Who hasn't felt like the universe threw a challenge too big to handle? And as if that weren't enough, the noise drew attention. From the other side of the slope, the ground shook with heavy steps. Elephants, a group of them led by a massive female, was heading toward the waterhole. Nia didn't back down. Even with fear pulsing through her, she stood her ground, roaring, challenging anyone who approached her cub. Quito, exhausted, could barely keep his head above water. The scene was heartbreaking. A lioness against the world, a cub fighting for life, and elephants that could crush them both without effort. But then, something unexpected happened. The lead elephant stopped, her huge ears flapping, and fixed, her eyes on the waterhole. What would she do with a trapped cub and a desperate mother? The air was heavy, laden with the smell of mud and the echo of Nia's roars. The waterhole, now a stage of despair, held Quito captive, his weak paws splashing. In the muddy water, Nia, at the edge, was pure instinct, her eyes blazing as she faced the approaching elephants. But the lead elephant, a giant with wrinkles like maps of a long life, didn't come with anger. She stopped, the ground trembling under her feet, and let out a low rumble that made the air vibrate. Have you ever felt a moment when time seems to slow, as if the universe is holding its breath? The elephant, whom the rangers called Zawadi, gift in Swahili, moved with a calm that defied her size. Her eyes, small but deep, locked onto Quito, then Nia. It was as if she understood the mother's desperation. Nia, tense, growled softly but didn't attack. Something in Zawadi's posture, maybe the deliberate slowness or the gentle sway of her trunk, seemed to say, "Trust me." And then, the unthinkable happened. Zawadi extended her trunk, long and strong like a living rope, and dipped it into the water. With precision that felt otherworldly, she wrapped it around Quito, holding him firmly yet gently. Can you believe an animal so massive can be so kind? Quito, exhausted, let himself be lifted, his little eyes half closed. Zawadi raised him slowly, water dripping from her trunk with the sound of drops hitting the mud. Nia stood frozen, her body trembling between the instinct to attack and the hope that this was a miracle. When Zawadi set Quito on the edge, wet but alive, Nia rushed to him, licking him with a frenzy of relief. Zawadi stepped back, letting out another low rumble as if saying, "It's okay now." Who hasn't seen an animal do something so human it leaves you speechless? This moment of compassion, this interspecies empathy, was like a beam of light in the cruel drought of the Serengeti. But the rescue wasn't over. Quito was weak, shivering, with scratches on his paws. And the elephants, though led by Zawadi, were still an intimidating presence. Nia, grateful but alert, kept her ears perked, ready to defend her cub. Then a familiar sound cut through the silence, the rumble of an old engine climbing the slope. Ranger Mosey was arriving. How would he handle a protective lioness, an injured cub, and a group of elephants in such a delicate moment? The rumble of Mosey's truck broke the silence like a timid thunder, climbing the waterhole's slope. The smell of old diesel mixed with the damp scent of mud, and the sun, now lower, cast long shadows that danced across the cracked earth. Nia, still glued to Quito, raised her head, her ears swiveling like antennas. The cub, soaked and shivering, mewed softly, nestled against his mother. Zawadi and the other elephants watched from a distance, their trunks swaying as if assessing the scene. Have you ever felt a moment when everything seems to hinge on one person doing the right thing? Mosey, with his battered hat and eyes that seemed to carry 1,000 Serengeti stories, stepped out of the truck with a calm that was almost sacred. He knew Nia. He'd seen her prowling the waterhole, always wary, always protective. But now, with Quito hurt and tension in the air, every move had to be perfect. He stopped a few meters away, crouching slowly, and spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper. "Easy, girl. I'm gonna help your little one." Nia growled but didn't advance. It was as if deep down she sensed this human wasn't a threat. Can you imagine what it's like to earn a lioness's trust in a moment like that? Mosey opened his backpack, the sound of the zipper echoing in the silence. He pulled out a first aid kit, moving with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Zawadi, still watching, let out a soft huff as if approving. Mosey approached step by step, keeping his eyes on Nia, not in challenge, but in respect. "You'll let me check him, right?" he said, more to himself. And then, in a move that seemed to defy logic, Nia stepped back just enough to let Mosey touch Quito. Who hasn't seen an animal and a human understand each other without words and thought, this is more than instinct? With care, Mosey examined Quito, cleaning the scratches with fresh water and applying cream to the injured paws. The cub, exhausted, only whimpered but didn't resist. Nia stood there, vigilant, her tail thumping the ground like a low drum. When Mosey finished, he stepped back, giving Nia space to return to her cub. She licked Quito as if thanking him silently, but Quito was still weak, and Mosey knew the waterhole wasn't the place for him to recover. He grabbed his radio, speaking quickly in Swahili. A plan was in motion. What would happen when Quito was taken away from the waterhole, and the mother who risked everything for him? Mosey's truck rattled along the trail, kicking up a cloud of dust that glowed golden in the setting sun. The smell of antiseptic lingered in the air, coming from the blanket where Quito was wrapped. On the seat beside him, the cub, still weak, breathed heavily, but his eyes, now half open, seemed to cling to life. Nia followed behind, a few meters back. her steady steps echoing on the dry earth like a war drum. She wouldn't let her cub go anywhere without her. Have you ever seen a love so fierce it seems to bend the rules of the world? Mosi drove carefully, his eyes flicking between the trail and the rearview mirror, where Nia was a golden shadow against the twilight. He knew separating a lioness from her cub was risky, but Keto needed more than bandages in the middle of the savannah. The Serengeti's medical center, a simple concrete building surrounded by acacias, was the cub's best shot. Their veterinarians could treat his scratches, give him fluids, and ensure he grew strong again. But convincing Nia to trust this plan, that was another story. Can you imagine what was going through her mind, watching her little one being taken by a human? At the center, Mosi parked and opened the door gently. The hum of a generator buzzed in the background, mixed with the distant chirping of crickets greeting the night. He carried Keto to a lit room, where a veterinarian named Aisha was waiting. Nia, outside, prowled the building, her eyes glinting. The dusk. Aisha worked quickly, cleaning Keto's wounds, applying antibiotics and hydrating him with a syringe. Keto mewed, weak, but began to move his paws as if feeling life return. Mosi, watching Nia through the window, left the door ajar, signaling she could enter. And she did, slowly, her nose sniffing the air. In an instant, she was beside Keto, licking him with a tenderness that made Aisha smile. Who hasn't felt that? An animal understands more than we think. Keto's recovery began there, under Nia's watchful gaze and the human care of Mosi and Aisha. But something bigger was forming. The lioness, the cub, the humans, and even Zawadi still lingering nearby seemed bound by something beyond the savannah. How would this unlikely bond change the way they faced the Serengeti? Night fell over the Serengeti, bringing a coolness that felt like a gift after weeks of scorching heat. The sky, speckled with stars, reflected in Nia's eyes as she rested beside Keto in the medical center. The soft sound of wind rustling the acacias blended with the generator's hum, creating a song that soothed the savannah. Keto, now stronger, slept curled up, his chest rising and falling with a peace Nia hadn't seen in days. But something bigger hung in the air, something beyond the cub's recovery. Have you ever felt a moment when everything seems to align, as if the universe is whispering a truth? Outside, Zawadi, the elephant who saved Keto, hadn't left. She roamed the area, her massive silhouette almost invisible in the dark, but her presence unmistakable. Mosi, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea that smelled of herbs, watched the scene. He'd seen many things in the Serengeti, territorial, fights, brutal hunts, but never this. Nia, the fierce lioness, no longer growled at Zawadi. Zawadi, in turn, kept a respectful distance, as if she knew her role in this drama was done but not over. And Mosi, the ranger who risked everything, was the thread tying these worlds together. Seriously, can you believe a lioness, an elephant, and a human could form a bond without a word? This silent pact was more than chance. When Nia looked at Zawadi, her golden eyes met the elephant's, and for a moment, it was as if they shared a promise. We protect our own, no matter who they are. Mosi, sensing it, felt a chill. He'd heard stories of interspecies helping each other, but living it was different. It was as if nature, so harsh in the drought, was showing that trust can bloom where it's least expected. Who hasn't looked at an animal and thought, you understand more than I'll ever explain? Keto, now stirring in his sleep, seemed the symbol of this bond. He survived because of a lioness who never gave up, an elephant who felt compassion, and a ranger who believed in the possibility of harmony. But their story didn't end there. The savannah still had lessons to teach, and the fate of Nia, Keto, and their allies was about to take a turn no one could predict. How would this unlikely connection echo in the Serengeti's future? Dawn in the Serengeti brought a gentle breeze, carrying the fresh scent of wet grass, a rare sign of rain after weeks of drought. The medical center, now bathed in golden light, felt less like a building and more like a sanctuary where nature had woven its magic. Nia, lying beside Keto, licked her cub with a calm that replaced the desperation of days past. Keto, with his paws now steady, nibbled at his mother's ear, his mischief returning as if the waterhole had never happened. Have you ever seen a Moment when life seems to say, everything's going to be okay. Keto was strong enough to leave the center, and Mosi, with his quiet way, arranged their return to the savannah. He and Aisha would monitor the pair from a distance, ensuring Keto's survival wasn't just a fleeting miracle. Nia, as if she understood the plan, walked beside the truck, the sound of her paws on the earth echoing like a victory march. Zawadi, the elephant, appeared one last time, standing on a nearby hill, her trunk raised like a farewell. It was as if she knew Keto was safe, that nature, though cruel, sometimes makes room for kindness. Can you imagine a goodbye so silent yet so powerful? The story of Nia and Keto spread among the rangers and reached nearby villages, becoming a legend about what conservation can do. Every waterhole maintained, every cub saved, was a reminder that humans and animals can work together. Keto, now, chasing butterflies under Nia's watchful eye, was living proof. Years later, rangers swore they saw a lioness and a young lion prowling the same waterhole, as if giving thanks. Who hasn't felt that an animal leaves a mark on your soul forever? But the savannah doesn't stop. The drought still loomed and other animals needed help. The lesson from Nia, Keto, Zawadi, and Mosi was clear. Survival isn't just strength, it's connection. And that connection, so fragile yet so strong, was just beginning to change the Serengeti. How would this story inspire others to protect nature? Sometimes the greatest teachers have 4 legs, or a trunk. The story of Nia, Keto, Zawadi, and Mosi is more than a tale of survival. It's a lesson in empathy, trust, and the power of bonds that cross species. In the heart of the Serengeti, where the drought tried to erase hope, a desperate lioness, a brave elephant, and a kind ranger proved that nature always has something to teach. Have you ever stopped to think how animals show us what really matters? The smell of wet earth, the sound of a cub running free, the calm of a look that says, I understand. That's what lingers. This story doesn't end with Nia and Keto. It lives on in the waterholes kept by rangers, in protected forests, in hearts that beat for a kinder planet. Conservation isn't just about saving animals, it's about saving pieces of our own souls. And you, have you ever had an animal change your life? Tell us in the comments. We want to know how these incredible creatures touched your heart. If this story warmed your chest, the next video suggested by YouTube will move you even more. Don't miss it. Leave a like, subscribe, and come with us to discover more stories that prove, in nature, love always finds a way.